Dr. Axxalor moved swiftly through the sterile halls of the Interstellar Medical Station, his long, slender limbs gliding across the floor in measured precision. His species, the Lumerians, were renowned throughout the Galactic Union for their advanced medical knowledge and meticulous attention to detail. Yet, even he felt a stir of anxiety as he approached the quarantine bay. The patient was human. Lieutenant James Carter had been brought in after a catastrophic accident at a remote outpost on the edge of explored space. His file was already embedded in Dr. Axxalor's neural interface, but even the cold data didn't prepare him for the sight that awaited him. Carter lay unconscious on the bio bed, his body battered and broken. His breathing was shallow, assisted by the station's automated systems. Bruises bloomed across his exposed skin, bones had splintered in several places, and internal scans showed severe organ trauma. A punctured lung, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. By Lumerian standards, this human should not have survived the journey. Human physiology is surprisingly fragile, one of his assistants remarked. Dr. Axxalor hummed in agreement, his large, dark eyes fixed on the human's readings. Their species, though physically durable, were viewed as unpredictable, prone to emotional outbursts and reckless behaviors. With a simple command, he activated the surgical drones, their arms unfurling from the ceiling like mechanical serpents. Precise lasers and nanite injectors began their work, weaving through Carter's injuries with a skill no organic hand could replicate. Dr. Axxalor watched intently, anticipating a long recovery ahead. Humans, while resilient in spirit, were not as biologically advanced as other species. Their bones would take weeks to knit together, and their internal damage, even with Lumerian technology, would require careful monitoring. As the hours passed, the medical team worked in silence, every action calibrated to maximize efficiency. Dr. Axxalor found himself wondering why the human had taken such risks in the first place. Was it ignorance? Bravado? The accident report suggested a careless disregard for safety measures, another trait common to this species. Once the procedure was complete, he checked the final scans. The initial results were promising, the human's vitals were stabilizing, though still fragile. Axxalor prepared his notes, setting the schedule for daily monitoring. He expected Carter would remain in a comatose state for some time. Given the extent of the trauma, even with their advanced medical care, recovery would be slow. But just as he was about to leave, something caught his eye. A flicker on the monitor, barely noticeable but unmistakable. The human's damaged tissues were regenerating at an abnormal rate. Dr. Axxalor frowned, pulling up the detailed data. What should have taken days had already begun in mere hours. Impossible, he whispered to himself. For the first time in his career, Dr. Axxalor wasn't sure of what he was seeing. The human was healing, faster than any species he had ever encountered. The fragile creature was more than it seemed. The next morning, Dr. Axxalor arrived at the medical bay with a sense of anticipation. As he entered, the first thing he noticed was the faint hum of the bio bed, accompanied by the gentle rhythm of Lieutenant Carter's breath. To his astonishment, the human was awake. His blue eyes flickered open, revealing a mix of confusion and pain. "Welcome back to consciousness, Lieutenant Carter," Dr. Axxalor said, his voice steady and calm. He leaned closer, observing the myriad of monitors that surrounded the bed. "You've been stabilized, but you sustained significant injuries." Carter blinked, trying to focus. "I feel like I've been hit by a transport ship," he muttered, a faint smile creeping onto his face. "Guess that means I'm still alive, huh?" Axxalor was taken aback by the human's humor. Most beings in such a state would express fear or anger, but Carter's resilient spirit intrigued him. "You are, indeed," he replied, adjusting the display to show Carter's recovery progress. "However, you remain in a critical state. Healing will take time." Carter glanced at the readings. "That doesn't look too bad," he said, feigning nonchalance. "I've had worse scrapes in the field." His casual dismissal of the severity of his injuries further puzzled Axxalor. Days passed, and Axxalor monitored Carter's recovery closely. The human's condition was baffling. Each morning, he returned to find Carter more alert, his strength seemingly replenishing itself. What should have taken weeks was now unfolding in mere days. The regenerative properties of human physiology were beyond anything the Lumerians had anticipated. "Your recovery rate is extraordinary," Axxalor admitted one day, as he adjusted a few settings on the medical equipment. "Most species do not heal as rapidly after such extensive trauma. How is it that you—" Carter cut him off, a grin spreading across his face. "Just being human, document. We're tough like that." Axxalor furrowed his brow, intrigued but skeptical. "Toughness alone does not explain your recovery. There must be underlying biological mechanisms at play. I have studied many species, yet none display such resilience." Carter sat up a little straighter, his expression turning serious. "It's not just about biology, Axxalor. It's about mentality, too. We humans have a knack for pushing through. You can break our bones, but you can't break our will." The concept was foreign to Axxalor, who had always relied on logic and reason to navigate his universe. "Emotion affects physiology?" he asked, struggling to comprehend. "Absolutely," Carter said, his voice steady. "Our minds play a huge role in how we heal. Hope, determination, they all contribute. You can't quantify that with numbers or charts." Dr. Axxalor contemplated Carter's words, feeling a spark of curiosity. He began to understand that humanity's strength lay not just in their physical form but in their tenacity and spirit. This notion challenged everything he had been taught about biological superiority in the Galactic Union. Days turned into weeks, and with each interaction, Axxalor found himself drawn into the complexities of human nature. He studied the files on human history, finding stories of survival and adaptation woven into the fabric of their species. He felt a growing respect for the enigmatic Lieutenant Carter, whose spirit seemed to embody the very essence of humanity. As Axxalor watched Carter's physical strength return, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing something profound, an unveiling of a resilience he had never encountered before. The human was not merely recovering, he was a testament to the indomitable nature of life itself. As Lieutenant Carter's recovery progressed, the medical bay transformed from a sterile hospital room into a vibrant space filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Dr. Axxalor found himself increasingly intrigued by the human, who, despite his injuries, radiated an undeniable energy. The bond between them deepened with each passing day, blending their vastly different worlds. One afternoon, as Axxalor adjusted the monitors, Carter shared stories of his adventures on Earth and beyond. "You know, we humans are explorers by nature," he said, his voice laced with enthusiasm. "We take risks, push boundaries, and sometimes get burned in the process. But that's how we grow." "Growth through risk," Axxalor repeated, mulling over the phrase. "Your species willingly subjects itself to danger for the sake of progress. This is illogical." Carter chuckled, a sound that was becoming increasingly familiar to Axxalor. "That's where you're wrong, document. Sometimes, logic doesn't explain everything. There's beauty in the chaos of life. It's the unknown that drives us to take chances." Axxalor considered this, noting how different it was from Lumerian culture, which favored safety and calculated decisions above all. But what of survival? Is it worth risking injury or death for exploration? Carter shrugged, a grin playing at the corners of his lips. "Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination. And sometimes, the best stories come from our worst mistakes." Just then, an alarm blared, shattering their conversation. Axxalor's heart raced as he rushed to the control panel, analyzing the data. "There's a reactor malfunction in Sector 4. Evacuations are necessary," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Before Axxalor could process the situation, Carter swung his legs over the side of the bed. "I'm not staying here," he declared, determination etched on his face. "You need all hands on deck, and I can't let you face this alone." Axxalor's instincts flared with concern. "You are not fully recovered. You could be injured further." Carter shot him a defiant look, his eyes burning with resolve. "And I could sit here and wait for someone else to do it. That's not who I am. If I can help, I will." Despite his reservations, Axxalor felt a surge of respect for the human's courage. "Very well," he conceded, "but you must follow my instructions precisely." With a nod, Carter staggered to his feet, his balance shaky but his spirit unwavering. Axxalor guided him through the corridors, his analytical mind racing with calculations. Every second counted, and they needed to reach the reactor before a catastrophic failure occurred. As they approached the reactor room, the alarms grew louder, echoing in their ears. Axxalor's heart raced, the urgency of the moment pressing down on him. He had always relied on careful planning, but in this moment, he found himself leaning on the unexpected partnership he had formed with this human. Inside the reactor chamber, chaos reigned. Crew members scrambled to assess the damage, and Axxalor quickly took charge. "I need a status report," he barked, his voice commanding authority. Amid the commotion, Carter worked alongside the technicians, his movements surprisingly agile despite his injuries. Axxalor watched as the human assessed the situation, problem-solving with instinct and intuition. "Get the coolant levels stabilized," Carter shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "If we don't, we'll overload the system." Axxalor's admiration for Carter swelled as he witnessed the human's unwavering resolve. In that moment, he realized that humanity's greatest strength lay not just in their physical endurance but in their capacity for courage and teamwork. As they worked together to avert disaster, Axxalor felt a shift within himself. The rigid boundaries of Lumerian logic began to blur, giving way to an appreciation for the emotional bonds that defined the human experience. In that chaotic moment, he understood, it was the soul behind the skin that made humans truly remarkable. The crisis in the reactor chamber had passed, leaving behind a lingering sense of relief mixed with adrenaline. As the alarms quieted and the lights stabilized, Dr. Axxalor took a moment to collect himself. He turned to Lieutenant Carter, who was catching his breath against a wall, exhaustion etched on his face but a triumphant smile shining through. "You did well today," Axxalor said, genuine admiration coloring his tone. "Your instincts saved lives." Carter leaned back, still catching his breath. "I had a good teacher," he replied, a playful glint in his eyes. "But I'd say it was teamwork more than anything. We all pulled together." Dr. Axxalor was struck by the human's perspective. To Carter, the focus on collaboration over individual accolades was natural. In Lumerian society, achievements were often measured by personal accolades, a distinction that had never felt necessary to challenge until now. Days turned into weeks, and as Carter's physical strength returned, their conversations grew deeper and more profound. Dr. Axxalor found himself sharing insights about Lumerian culture, their stoic nature, and how emotions were often seen as a distraction from the logic that governed their society. In return, Carter spoke passionately about the complexities of human emotions, their joys, sorrows, and the strength they derived from both. "Emotions are what make us human," Carter explained one evening as they sat in the medical bay. "They drive us, connect us, and sometimes even break us. But through all that, we find a way to keep going. That's our real strength." "Yet you also express vulnerability," Axxalor observed. "Is it not a liability?" "Not at all," Carter countered, shaking his head. "Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's part of being alive. It allows us to connect with one another, to understand pain and joy. It's what makes the triumphs feel real." Axxalor pondered this, feeling a growing sense of kinship with the human. He had always viewed vulnerability as a risk, a flaw to be avoided. But now, he began to see it as a bridge to greater understanding and empathy. The more he learned about Carter and humanity, the more he was drawn into their intricate tapestry of experiences. One afternoon, as they reviewed data from the reactor incident, Axxalor decided to confront his own biases. "Carter, I have a question. In my research, I have seen that humans often face overwhelming challenges. Why do you choose to confront danger head-on instead of retreating into safety?" Carter smiled, a warmth in his eyes. "Because life is about more than just existing. It's about making choices, facing fears, and finding purpose. Every challenge we overcome adds to our story. It shapes who we are." The significance of Carter's words resonated deeply within Axxalor. He began to realize that his own life had been lived in the confines of logic and restraint, devoid of the vibrancy that came with embracing the unpredictability of existence. For the first time, he felt a yearning to experience life more fully, to break free from the rigid expectations of Lumerian culture. As the days continued, Axxalor embraced the complexity of his evolving friendship with Carter. The human was not just a patient or a subject of study, he was a mirror reflecting the deeper truths of resilience, emotional strength, and the beauty of imperfection. In a final act of gratitude and respect, Carter gifted Axxalor a worn book, ****The Art of War****, an exploration of strategy, humanity, and the myriad choices that shape destiny. "Read it," Carter urged, "and remember that even in conflict, there's always room for compassion." With the book in hand, Axxalor felt a shift within him. This journey had not only been about healing a human, it had unveiled a path to understanding the heart of what it meant to be alive. As he turned the pages, he knew that the lessons learned would forever change his perspective, not just on humans, but on the intricate dance of life itself.